The summer sun beat down on the gleaming glass doors of Premier Market as Maya took one final deep breath, straightening her freshly pressed blue blazer. At just 19, this would be her first real job interview, and the stack of certificates and recommendation letters in her folder felt like a shield against her nervousness. The automatic doors swoosh open, welcoming her into the cool air-conditioned store. The produce section sparkled under bright lights, fruits and vegetables arranged in perfect pyramids. Maya couldn't help but smile. She'd been shopping here with her family since she was little, though nobody in the store knew that her father had anything to do with the company. "I'm here for the interview," she told the customer service desk clerk, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I applied for the part-time cashier position." The clerk's friendly expression changed slightly as she picked up the phone to call the manager. Maya pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the positive thoughts her mom had helped her practice that morning. "You're qualified, you're capable, and you deserve to be here," she repeated silently to herself. 10 minutes turned into 20, then 30. Other applicants who came after her were called in first. Maya kept her composure, though her palms were getting sweaty. She'd learned from her parents that patience and professionalism were everything in the business world. Finally, Frank Harrison emerged from his office. The store manager was a tall man with a permanent frown etched between his eyebrows. He barely glanced at Maya's extended hand before leading her to his office, walking so fast she had to practically jog to keep up. "So," he began, not even looking at her resume, "what makes you think you're suitable for Premier Market?" There was something in the way he said suitable that made Maya's skin crawl, but she smiled anyway. "I'm currently maintaining a 3.9 GPA in business administration at State University," she began, "and I've been involved in several student leadership programs." "This isn't some fancy college program," Frank cut her off, drumming his fingers on his desk. "This is about stocking shelves and working a register. Maybe you'd be more comfortable applying somewhere else. Somewhere more, you know." He waved his hand vaguely. Maya felt her cheeks burn, but kept her voice level. "Actually, sir, I have experience with POS systems from volunteering at my community center's shop. And—" "Look," Frank interrupted again, standing up. "We have a certain image to maintain here. Our customers have expectations. I'm sure you understand." He was already opening his office door, clearly dismissing her. Maya gathered her documents with trembling hands, but refused to let him see how much his words had hurt. As she walked through the store, past the friendly waves of some regular customers who recognized her, she pulled out her phone and made a single note. Day 1. Interview completed. Her father had always taught her to document everything, though Frank had no idea he just treated the CEO's daughter like she was somehow less than human. What Frank also didn't know was that Maya wasn't just looking for a summer job. She was conducting research for her own project on modern workplace discrimination. And she had no intention of giving up after one failed interview. Tomorrow, she decided, she would return with even more qualifications. Not because she needed to prove herself to someone like Frank, but because sometimes the best way to change a broken system was to expose it from the inside. As she pushed through those automatic doors again, stepping back into the heat, Maya allowed herself a small smile. This was just the beginning, and she had inherited her father's patience and determination. Frank Harrison had no idea what was coming, but he was about to learn some very important lessons about judging people by the color of their skin. The next morning, Maya arrived at Premier Market right as the store opened, carrying an even thicker folder than before. She'd stayed up late adding her volunteering certificates, typing up detailed references, and printing out testimonials from people she'd helped at the community center. The early morning customers were mostly elderly folks getting their shopping done before the heat set in, and several smiled at her warmly. "Back again," the same customer service clerk from yesterday whispered, looking concerned. "Listen, honey, maybe you should try the store across town instead. She glanced nervously toward the manager's office. "I appreciate your concern," Maya replied softly, "but I'm not going anywhere." She stood tall, smooth hands clasped in front of her, projecting the quiet confidence her mother had taught her. The truth was, her heart was pounding, but she wouldn't let it show. This time, Frank made her wait even longer. 2 hours passed as Maya sat quietly on the hard plastic chair, watching other applicants come and go. She noticed something interesting. Every person Frank interviewed quickly matched a certain profile. Her fingers itched to take notes, but she kept her hands still, maintaining her peaceful expression. When Frank finally emerged, his face twisted into an annoyed scowl at seeing her. "You again? I thought I made myself clear yesterday." "Yes, sir, you did," Maya responded pleasantly. "That's why I brought additional qualifications for your consideration." She held out her folder, forcing him to either take it or make a scene in front of customers. Frank snatched the folder and flipped through it carelessly. "Well, isn't this impressive?" he drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Student council president, volunteer work, perfect grades. But can you handle a real job?" "Why don't you test me?" Maya suggested calmly. "I can start right now. Put me on any register, stock any shelf, handle any task you choose." Several nearby customers had slowed their shopping, obviously listening. Frank noticed too, his face reddening slightly. "Fine," he snapped. "Follow me." He led her to the break room, where several employees were having their morning coffee. Instead of offering her a private interview, Frank gestured for her to sit at the central table. Maya understood what he was doing, trying to humiliate her in front of everyone. But she just smiled and sat down gracefully. "So tell me," Frank began loudly, ensuring everyone could hear, "how exactly do you think you'd handle difficult customers? People can be very demanding in this neighborhood." "I believe in treating everyone with respect," Maya answered clearly. "Just last month at the community center, we had a situation where—" Frank cut her off. "And what about heavy lifting? Those watermelon displays don't stack themselves, you know." He smirked, thinking he was being clever. A few employees shuffled uncomfortably. One young woman in the corner, wearing an assistant manager badge, was frowning deeply and writing something in a small notebook. Maya kept her voice steady. "I'm stronger than I look, sir. But I'm even better at working smart. For instance, I noticed your current display arrangement requires restocking 3 times as often as necessary. If you'd allow me to demonstrate a more efficient pattern—" "That's enough," Frank interrupted, standing abruptly. "I don't need some college kid telling me how to run my store. This position requires experience, real experience, not just fancy paperwork." Maya rose slowly, gathering her documents. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Harrison. I'll be back tomorrow with my work portfolio from the campus store. Have a wonderful day." She walked out with her head high, ignoring his sputtering behind her. In her car, Maya finally let out a long breath. She pulled out her phone and added to her notes. Day 2. Witnessed discriminatory interview practices, attempted public humiliation, multiple witnesses present. She also noted the assistant manager who'd been taking notes. Maybe, she thought, she wasn't the only one who saw something wrong with Frank's behavior. What Frank didn't realize was that each rejection only made Maya more determined. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every qualified person who'd ever been turned away for the wrong reasons. Tomorrow would bring another chance, and Maya was just getting started. The morning of her 3rd visit to Premier Market felt different. The store was bustling with midweek shoppers, and Maya noticed several employees watching her as she walked in. Some offered subtle, encouraging smiles. It seemed word had spread about her previous interviews with Frank. "He's in a really bad mood today," the cashier whispered as Maya passed by. "Maybe come back another time." Maya adjusted her blazer and smiled. "Thank you for caring, but I'll be okay." This time, Frank stormed out of his office almost immediately. His face was already red, and he'd clearly been waiting for her. "Don't you have anything better to do?" he demanded loudly, making several customers turn their heads. "Actually, sir, I brought something that might interest you," Maya replied calmly, pulling out a tablet. "I've prepared a presentation on how I could help improve store efficiency and customer service. Follow me." Frank cut her off, practically marching toward the break room. Maya noticed the assistant manager from yesterday quickly slip in behind them, phone held low at her side. The break room was half full, with employees taking their morning break. None of them made any move to leave, despite Frank's obvious anger. If anything, more workers seemed to find reasons to enter the room. "Let me make something very clear," Frank announced, his voice echoing off the bare walls. "This isn't some fancy college project. This is a real job in a real store with real customers who have certain expectations." Maya kept her voice steady. "I understand completely. That's why No, I don't think you do understand," Frank continued, getting louder. "Do you really think our regular customers want someone like you handling their groceries, counting their change, running their credit cards?" The room went deadly quiet. In the corner, the assistant manager's phone was definitely recording now, though she tried to keep it hidden behind a clipboard. "Mr. Harrison," Maya began, her voice clear and professional despite the trembling in her hands, "are you suggesting that my qualifications don't matter because of how I look?" "Qualifications?" Frank laughed harshly. "You want to talk about qualifications. Let me tell you something about qualifications in the real world." An older customer, who had wandered in looking for the restroom, suddenly spoke up. "Excuse me, but is this how you train your managers to conduct interviews?" Frank spun around, startled. "This is a private employee area, ma'am." "Well, I couldn't help but overhear," the customer continued, her voice shaking with anger. "I've been shopping here for 20 years, and I've never been so disappointed. This young lady has shown nothing but professionalism while you—" "This doesn't concern you," Frank snapped, but now other employees were standing up straighter, finding their courage. The assistant manager stepped forward, no longer hiding her phone. "I've documented everything, Mr. Harrison. Every interview, every comment, every qualified applicant you've turned away this month. Would you like me to share the pattern I've noticed?" Frank's face went from red to purple. "Are you threatening me? I'll have your job for this. I'll have all your jobs." He turned back to Maya, pointing a finger at her face. "And you think you can come in here, cause trouble in my store?" "Your store?" Maya asked quietly, letting the question hang in the air. The break room had grown even more crowded. Employees who'd suffered under Frank's management for months or years were watching with held breath. The customer who'd spoken up was now on her own phone, apparently dialing corporate headquarters. "I'm calling security," Frank declared, reaching for the store phone. "This is trespassing. This is harassment." Maya simply stood there, calm as ever, watching him unravel. She didn't need to say anything else. Frank was doing all the work for her, showing everyone exactly who he was. "You really should check your security footage from my first 2 visits," Maya suggested softly. "And maybe brush up on employment law. Discrimination isn't just wrong, it's illegal." Frank froze, the phone halfway to his ear, as the weight of the last few days started to sink in. How many people had witnessed his behavior? How many had recorded it? And who exactly was this composed young woman who kept coming back, unafraid and undeterred? Little did he know, his world was about to turn upside down. The next visitor to Premier Market wouldn't be another job applicant. It would be someone far more important. And Maya's patient documentation of everything that had happened was about to prove very, very valuable. After the heated confrontation in the break room, Maya sat in her car, finally letting her hands shake as she wrote detailed notes about everything that had happened. A knock on her window made her jump. It was the assistant manager, looking nervously over her shoulder. "Can we talk?" she asked, clutching a thick manila folder to her chest. "Not here, though. The coffee shop across the street." 5 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of the cafe, steaming cups untouched between them. The assistant manager, who introduced herself as Lily, spread several documents across the table. "I've been keeping records for months," Lily explained, her voice barely above a whisper despite being far from the store. "Every qualified applicant he's turned away, every uncomfortable comment, every time he's made the work environment hostile." She pushed a paper forward. "See these numbers? They show the pattern clear as day." Maya studied the carefully documented dates, names, and incidents. "You've been very thorough," she said softly. "Why haven't you reported this to HR?" Lily's laugh was bitter. "Oh, I have. Multiple times." She pulled out a stack of emails. "They always say the same thing. We'll look into it, or we need more concrete evidence. Meanwhile, Frank just keeps getting worse." A group of Premier Market employees entered the coffee shop, and both women instinctively lowered their voices even further. Maya noticed how Lily's hands trembled slightly as she arranged her documents. "You know what's funny?" Lily continued, stirring her untouched coffee. "I almost didn't take this job. My kids needed me to work days, and this was the only place offering the right hours. Now I feel stuck. I can't afford to lose this job, but watching him treat people this way." She trailed off, blinking rapidly. "That's exactly what he counts on," Maya replied gently. "People being too afraid to speak up because they need their jobs." "But you're different," Lily said, studying Maya's face. 3 days in a row, despite how he treated you. Most people don't come back after the first rejection. What makes you so determined?" Maya carefully considered her response. "Let's just say I believe in standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult." "Well, you've already made a difference," Lily said, pulling out her phone. "Watch this." She played the video from the break room. The audio was crystal clear. Every discriminatory comment, every angry outburst from Frank captured perfectly. "And I've got more. So many more." Maya felt a surge of hope. "Would you be willing to share these? All of them?" "That's why I wanted to talk to you," Lily said, straightening up. "Something about you. I feel like you might actually be able to make something happen. Like maybe all these months of documenting everything weren't for nothing." Just then, Lily's phone buzzed. Her eyes widened as she read the message. "Oh my God. Corporate just announced a surprise store visit. Tomorrow morning. The CEO himself is coming." Maya kept her expression neutral, but her heart beat faster. "Really? That's interesting timing." "Frank's going to lose it," Lily said, gathering her documents quickly. "He hates surprise inspections. Last time, he made us stay hours after closing to clean everything twice." "Maybe this time will be different," Maya suggested carefully. "Maybe this is exactly what needs to happen." Lily paused, studying Maya again. "You know something, don't you? There's more to you than just a college student looking for a summer job." Maya simply smiled. "Let's just say I believe in justice. And sometimes justice needs a little help to find its way." As they left the coffee shop, Lily pressed a manila folder into Maya's hands. "Here's copies of everything I have. Use them well." She hesitated, then added, "Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for not giving up, for showing us all that it's possible to stand up to people like Frank." Maya watched Lily hurry back to the store, clutching the folder that contained months of careful documentation. Tomorrow would change everything, not just for her, but for every employee who'd suffered under Frank's leadership. Her father had always taught her that real change comes from standing up for others, not just yourself. She pulled out her phone one last time. Day 3. Evidence collected. Allies found. Tomorrow, justice arrives. The news of the CEO's visit spread through Premier Market like wildfire. Frank paced the aisles frantically, barking orders at everyone in sight. Those displays need to be perfect. Someone fix that crooked sign. Where's the cleaning crew? The morning sun hadn't even fully risen, but the store was buzzing with nervous energy. Employees rushed around with cleaning supplies and price checkers, trying to avoid Frank's increasing panic. "Sir," one of the stock boys called out, "should we bring out the new promotional banners?" "Yes." "No." "Wait." Frank ran his hands through his thinning hair. "Does anyone even know what time he's coming? Who told him to show up without proper notice?" Lily stood quietly at her register, watching the chaos while typing something on her phone. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth as she remembered her conversation with Maya yesterday. The automatic doors swished open, and everyone froze. But it was just Maya, walking in calmly with a coffee cup in her hand. Frank's face contorted with rage. "You! What are you doing here? Today of all days." He stomped toward her, but kept his voice low, clearly aware of how his previous outbursts had been recorded. "Get out before I call security." "Actually," Maya said pleasantly, "I heard about the CEO's visit. I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to discuss my application with someone from corporate." Frank's face went pale. You planned this somehow, didn't you? All those visits, the recordings." He leaned in close, whispering furiously. "Listen here, you troublemaker." The doors swish open again. This time, a tall man in an expertly tailored suit walked in, his presence immediately commanding attention. Behind him, 2 corporate executives followed with tablets and notebooks at the ready. Frank's entire demeanor changed instantly. "Mr. Johnson, what an honor. We weren't expecting you quite so early." He practically tripped over himself rushing to greet the CEO. David Johnson, CEO of Premier Market Chain, surveyed the store with keen eyes. "I like to see how my stores operate during normal hours, mister." He paused, glancing at his tablet. "Harrison, is it?" "Yes, sir. Frank Harrison, store manager for 5 years now." Frank's voice had gone up an octave. "I can assure you everything is running perfectly here. Our sales numbers are up. Customer complaints are down." "Interesting," Mr. Johnson said, still scanning the store. "I've actually heard quite a few concerning reports about this location, particularly regarding your hiring practices." Frank's smile faltered. "Sir, I can explain everything. We maintain very high standards here." "Yes, let's talk about those standards." Mr. Johnson's voice was calm but firm. "I've received some very interesting documentation about your recent interviews." Maya stood quietly near the customer service desk, watching the scene unfold. Several employees had gathered nearby, including Lily, who was still recording everything on her phone. "I believe you met my daughter recently," Mr. Johnson continued casually. "She had some fascinating insights about your management style." The color drained from Frank's face as he slowly turned to look at Maya. She gave a small wave, still holding her coffee cup. Your daughter," Frank stammered. "But she never said." "Of course she didn't," Mr. Johnson replied. "Maya wanted to experience the real hiring process, not get special treatment. She's been researching workplace discrimination for a project at university. I must say, you've provided her with quite a lot of material." The silence in the store was deafening. Customers had stopped shopping to watch. Employees held their breath. Frank looked like he might faint. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in your office," Mr. Johnson suggested, though it wasn't really a suggestion. "Maya, would you join us? And," he looked at Lily, "I believe the assistant manager who's been documenting everything should come too." As they walked toward the office, Maya caught snippets of whispered conversations from the employees. That's why she kept coming back. No wonder she wasn't afraid of him. Did you see Frank's face when he realized? The truth was finally coming to light, and Maya felt a mix of satisfaction and responsibility. This wasn't about revenge, it was about making real change. As she followed her father and Frank to the office, she thought about all the people who had faced discrimination without having a CEO for a father. Today wasn't just about her victory. It was about making sure this never happened to anyone else at Premier Market again. The fluorescent lights in Frank's office seemed especially harsh as Mr. Johnson settled into a chair, taking his time to arrange his tablet and documents. Maya and Lily sat quietly to one side while Frank fidgeted behind his desk, sweating visibly now. "Let's start with some numbers," Mr. Johnson began, his voice steady and professional. "In the past year, how many people have you hired at this location?" Frank tugged at his collar. "Well, sir, we maintain very strict standards." "The number, please." 23 new hires," Frank mumbled. "Interesting." Mr. Johnson swiped through his tablet. "And can you explain why every single one of them fits a very specific profile?" Before Frank could respond, Lily quietly placed her folder on the desk. "I have the complete applicant records here, sir, including all the qualified candidates who were rejected without proper consideration." Frank shot her a betrayed look. "You've been spying on me?" "Recording everything." "That's against store policy." "Actually," Mr. Johnson interrupted, "documenting workplace discrimination is protected by law. Something you might want to familiarize yourself with." He opened Lily's folder, spreading out the carefully organized papers. "These make for very interesting reading." Maya watched as her father methodically went through each document. She'd seen him use this technique in board meetings, staying calm, letting the evidence speak for itself, giving people enough rope to either pull themselves up or— "This can't be legal," Frank suddenly burst out. "Coming in here under false pretenses, sending your daughter to trap me." "Trap you?" Maya spoke up for the first time. "Into what?" "Into showing who you really are. Into treating me the same way you treat every other qualified applicant who doesn't match your image." A knock at the door interrupted them. One of the corporate executives entered with a USB drive. "Sir, we've reviewed the security footage from the past 3 days as requested." "Excellent," Mr. Johnson said. "And the customer complaint records?" "All here," the executive replied, handing over another file, "including several that never made it to corporate review." Frank slumped in his chair as Mr. Johnson began playing clips from the security footage. There he was, making Maya wait for hours. There he was, making discriminatory comments in the break room. There he was, turning away qualified applicant after qualified applicant. "The interesting thing about prejudice," Mr. Johnson said quietly, "is how it doesn't just hurt the people you discriminate against. It hurts the whole business. How many talented employees have we lost because of your standards, Mr. Harrison? How many loyal customers have we alienated?" Outside the office, employees had gathered, trying to look busy while straining to hear what was happening. Through the window, Maya could see them watching, hope mixing with anxiety on their faces. "I've worked here for 5 years," Frank said weakly. "Our numbers are good. Our store is profitable." "Despite your management, not because of it," Mr. Johnson corrected. He turned to Lily. "How long have you been documenting these issues?" 8 months, sir," she replied. "I started after the 3rd time HR ignored my reports." Mr. Johnson nodded gravely. "Yes, we'll be addressing those failures at corporate as well. This isn't just about one manager or one store." He stood up, straightening his tie. "Mr. Harrison, you'll be hearing from our legal department this afternoon. In the meantime, I suggest you clean out your office." Frank's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You're firing me?" "Just like that." "Just like that." Maya couldn't help but respond. After months of documented discrimination, after creating a hostile work environment, after violating multiple labor laws, actually, you're getting off pretty easy. Mr. Johnson placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. This isn't about revenge. It's about making things right. He turned to Lily. Would you mind giving the store employees an update? I believe they're all quite anxious to hear the outcome. As Lily hurried out, Frank sat there, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. Everything he'd built, all his power over others, crumbling because he couldn't see past his own prejudices. Maya watched him, feeling not triumph, but a kind of sadness. How many other Franks were out there? How many other stores needed changing? This was just the beginning of a much bigger fight. But today, at least, justice had won. The employee break room had never been so crowded. Workers from every department squeezed in, some still wearing their aprons, others clutching their name badges nervously. The buzz of whispered conversations filled the air as they waited for the store meeting to begin. Mr. Johnson stood at the front of the room, his presence commanding yet approachable. Maya noticed how different he looked from the dad who made pancakes on Sunday mornings. Here, he was every inch the CEO, but his eyes still held that same kindness she'd known all her life. Good morning, everyone, he began, his voice carrying to every corner. I'm sure you're all wondering why I'm here today. Let me start by saying this isn't just a routine inspection. Frank slouched in a corner chair, looking defeated. His usual aggressive confidence had vanished, replaced by a pale, sweaty nervousness. He kept glancing at Maya, then quickly looking away. For months, Mr. Johnson continued, this store has operated under management practices that go against everything Premier Market stands for. Discrimination, harassment, creating a hostile work environment. These aren't just policy violations. They're attacks on human dignity. The room went completely silent. Several employees nodded slowly, years of frustration visible on their faces. But today, that changes. He gestured to Lily. Thanks to your assistant manager's detailed documentation, and thanks to my daughter's willingness to expose these practices firsthand, we now have concrete evidence of what's been happening here. A collective gasp filled the room as all eyes turned to Maya. She stood up straighter, meeting their gazes calmly. Your daughter, one of the cashiers exclaimed. But you're the one who... She turned to Frank, realization dawning. Oh my goodness. Frank finally found his voice, though it shook. If I'd known who she was. That's exactly the point. Mr. Johnson cut him off firmly. You shouldn't treat anyone differently based on who they are or who they know. Every person who walks through those doors, whether they're a customer or an applicant, deserves respect and fair treatment. Lily stepped forward, holding up her phone. I have recordings of every discriminatory comment, every unfair rejection, every instance of harassment. And it's not just from the last 3 days. The employees began sharing their own stories, gaining courage from each other. He told me I'd never be promoted because customers wouldn't respect me. I watched him tear up applications without even reading them. He made comments about my accent in front of customers. Frank tried to stand, to defend himself, but Mr. Johnson's steady gaze pushed him back into his chair. I worked hard for this position, Frank protested weakly. I kept this store profitable. No, Maya spoke up, her voice clear and strong. These people kept the store profitable. They did their jobs with pride and professionalism despite how you treated them. They succeeded not because of you, but in spite of you. Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Some employees were wiping away tears, others standing taller, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. As of today, Mr. Johnson announced, Frank Harrison is no longer the manager of this store. But this isn't just about removing one person. It's about changing the culture. He turned to address the whole room. I want to personally apologize to each of you who experienced or witnessed discrimination here. You deserved better. And from now on, you'll get better. Maya watched the faces around her light up with hope and relief. This was why she'd endured Frank's treatment for 3 days, not for revenge, but for them. for every person who'd been made to feel less than worthy because of someone else's prejudice. Starting tomorrow, Mr. Johnson continued, we're implementing new hiring practices, anti-discrimination training, and a direct line to corporate for reporting any concerns. And Ms. Lilly will be acting as interim manager while we search for a permanent replacement. The room burst into applause. Lily looked stunned but determined, already standing a little straighter in her new role. In his corner, Frank finally seemed to understand the full magnitude of what his actions had cost him. Not just his job, but his reputation, his authority, and most importantly, the respect of every person in that room. Maya caught her father's proud smile and felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Sometimes, she thought, the best way to fight darkness was simply to turn on the lights and let everyone see the truth. The weeks following Frank's departure brought dramatic changes to Premier Market. The store hummed with a new energy as Lily stepped into her role as interim manager, bringing a fresh leadership style that emphasized respect and inclusion. On a bright Monday morning, employees gathered for their first mandatory anti-discrimination training session. The break room had been transformed with new chairs and a projector screen, showing the company's commitment to change wasn't just talk. Today marks a new chapter, Lily announced, standing confidently at the front of the room. The nervous assistant manager from before had been replaced by a capable leader who carried herself with quiet authority. We're not just learning rules, we're building a better workplace culture. The corporate trainer, a warm-voiced woman named Mrs. Chen, clicked to the first slide. Let's start by discussing what a truly inclusive workplace looks like. Can anyone share their thoughts? Hands shot up around the room. People who'd stayed quiet for years now felt free to speak. The stock boy who Frank had always dismissed shared his ideas about making the store more accessible. A cashier suggested translating store signs into multiple languages to better serve their diverse community. During a short break, 2 newer employees approached Lily with tears in their eyes. We interviewed here 6 months ago, one explained. Frank wouldn't even look at our applications. We just got hired last week under the new policy. Maya, who had stopped by to see how things were progressing, watched from the doorway with a smile. Her father stood beside her, both of them observing the transformation taking place. You know, Mr. Johnson said quietly, when you first told me about your idea to expose discrimination through first-hand experience, I was worried. Not just as your father, but as a CEO. I wondered if there might be a less confrontational way. Maya nodded, remembering their long discussion about it. But sometimes you have to shine a light directly on the problem. People can ignore reports and statistics, but they can't ignore real experiences. The training session resumed, now focusing on practical scenarios. Mrs. Chen presented various situations, and employees worked together to identify and address discriminatory behavior. The discussions were honest, sometimes uncomfortable, but always respectful. Remember, Mrs. Chen emphasized, change doesn't happen overnight. We'll make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them and doing better. Later that afternoon, Maya helped Lily set up the new anonymous reporting system, a secure digital platform where employees could report concerns without fear of retaliation. They also installed suggestion boxes in several locations, encouraging everyone to contribute ideas for improvement. You know what's amazing? Lily said, testing the new system. Sales are actually up since these changes started. Turns out treating people with respect is good for business. The store's transformation hadn't gone unnoticed by customers either. Many commented on the more positive atmosphere, the more diverse staff, the warmer welcome they received. The very things Frank had feared would hurt business were making it thrive. As Maya walked through the aisles, she overheard a conversation between 2 employees restocking shelves. Remember how scared we used to be to make suggestions? Now I actually look forward to coming to work, like we're part of something good. Near the customer service desk, the same clerk who'd first warned Maya about Frank was helping a job applicant. We review every application fairly, she explained proudly. And we have a new mentorship program for new hires. Mr. Johnson reviewed the weekly reports with satisfaction. Complaints were down, employee retention was up, and the store's reputation in the community was improving daily. But more importantly, people were smiling, talking openly, sharing ideas without fear. Your project turned into something bigger than exposing one manager's discrimination, he told Maya as they prepared to leave. It sparked real change. Maya watched a group of employees laughing together during their break. People from different backgrounds, ages, and experiences, all working together as equals. This was what justice looked like, not just punishing wrong, but building something better in its place. As she headed to her car, Maya noticed the store's new motto painted proudly above the entrance. Everyone welcome, everyone valued, everyone respected. Simple words, but they meant everything. 6 months had passed since the day Frank's discriminatory practices were exposed. Premier Market had become a model store for the entire chain, and today was special. The grand reopening celebration after a complete renovation. Colorful balloons decorated the entrance, and a diverse crowd of employees and customers gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The store had been transformed inside and out, but the biggest changes weren't just physical. Lily, now officially confirmed as the permanent store manager, stood proudly with her team. Under her leadership, the store had implemented changes that went far beyond corporate requirements. A community bulletin board displayed job opportunities in multiple languages. The break room had been converted into a training center where employees could take free courses on management and customer service. When I think about 6 months ago, Lily addressed the crowd, her voice strong and clear. I remember being afraid to speak up. Now, our biggest challenge is keeping up with all the amazing suggestions from our team. Maya sat in the front row beside her father, watching the ceremony. She just finished her university thesis on workplace discrimination, using Premier Market as a case study in how to create positive change. The paper had already caught the attention of several major companies looking to improve their own practices. Mr. Johnson stepped up to the podium, surveying the gathered crowd with pride. What happened in this store wasn't just about removing one manager's discriminatory practices. It was about building something new, a workplace where everyone truly has the chance to succeed. He gestured to the wall behind him, where photos showed the store's transformation. But it wasn't just pictures of new shelves and signs, it was images of people. Employees who'd been promoted, new hires who'd never gotten a chance before, customers whose lives had been touched by the changes. A young employee stepped forward to share her story. 3 months ago, I applied here after being rejected from 12 other places. Ms. Lily didn't just give me a job. She gave me a chance to prove myself. Next month, I start training as a department supervisor. The crowd applauded, and more people began sharing their experiences. My daughter feels proud to shop here now. I've worked retail for 20 years, and this is the first place that feels like family. The mentorship program helped me gain confidence. Maya noticed a familiar face at the back of the crowd. Frank. He stood quietly, watching the celebration, his expression a mix of regret and understanding. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave a small nod before turning to leave. Sometimes, Maya thought, the best revenge was showing people a better way. The ceremony continued with the introduction of new initiatives. A partnership with local schools for job training. A diversity council made up of employees and community members. A scholarship program for staff pursuing further education. But our proudest achievement, Lily announced, is our perfect score on the corporate inclusion audit. Every single employee reported feeling valued and respected at work. As the ribbon was cut and people flooded into the renovated store, Maya overheard 2 customers talking. Remember how tense it used to feel in here? Now it's like shopping with friends. Everyone's so helpful and genuine. Later, during the celebration lunch, Mr. Johnson pulled Maya aside. Your mother would have been so proud, he said softly. She always taught you to stand up for what's right. But I don't think either of us expected you to create such meaningful change. Maya watched the diverse group of employees and customers mingling, sharing food and stories. The fear and tension that had once filled these aisles had been replaced with warmth and genuine connection. "You know what's beautiful?" she told her father. "This isn't just one store anymore. Other managers are asking Lily to train their teams. The ripple effect is spreading." As the day drew to a close, Maya took one last walk through the store. The new motto still hung above the entrance, but now it wasn't just words. It was reality. In every aisle, every interaction, every smile exchanged between people who might never have worked together under the old system. She stopped at the customer service desk, where 6 months ago she'd sat nervously waiting for an interview. The same clerk was there, but now she wore a supervisor badge. "Thank you," the clerk said simply, "for showing us we could stand up for ourselves." Maya smiled, thinking of all the lives touched, all the changes made, all the barriers broken. "Sometimes," she replied, "all it takes is one person willing to shine a light on the truth. The rest is up to everyone brave enough to stand in that light and say things can be better." And they were. They truly were.